It was mid-morning in Boneville, a quiet quarter on the edge of Ouagadougou, when something quietly radical rolled in. Not a parade, not a convoy, just a white truck with blue letters, Police Nationale. No sirens, no shouts, no threat, just presence. Children paused their games. Elders shaded their eyes. Market women whispered. Then, slowly they walked toward it, not to protest, not to plead, but to participate. Each carried worn papers, birth certificates, faded IDs, proof of life, long-lived, yet never officially acknowledged. And for once, the state did not call them into line. The state came to them. No speeches were made. No cameras flashed, but something sacred stirred, recognition. In a continent where bureaucracy often feels like punishment, here was a truck offering dignity on wheels. What happens when power steps off the pedestal and sits beside the people? Stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future our ancestors dreamed of. Subscribe and stand with us for an Africa that will never bow again. In many parts of West Africa, the greatest threat to safety is not violence, it is distance. The distance between citizens and the state, between the people and the services meant to protect them, between the promise of justice and the paper that delivers it. In Boneville, like hundreds of neighborhoods on the fringes of Ouagadougou, state presence is not a daily reality. It is a rumor. Police stations are too far. Legal offices are overwhelmed. If you need to legalize a document, you'll likely sacrifice a full day, maybe two. And for the poor, time is not just money. It is food. It is medicine. It is survival. Over time, people stop trying. They stop waiting. They stop believing. The bureaucracy becomes a blockade. The state, a fortress too distant to reach. And in that vacuum, mistrust grows. Petty crime festers. Fear replaces order. Not because people are violent, but because no one is watching. In 2023, this quiet crisis reached its boiling point. Reports of insecurity climbed across urban zones in Burkina Faso. But Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw something deeper. He saw not just the absence of policing, but the absence of presence. What if the issue wasn't just how the police responded, but how far they stood? He called his advisors. He summoned senior officers. And then he asked a question most governments avoid. What if we went to them instead of waiting for them to come to us? That was the birth of an idea. A truck. Just one. Not for arrests. Not for raids. But for recognition. The Inspector General of Police, Terry Twina, took that idea and made it operational. With a small team, they converted a standard white vehicle into a mobile state office. Computers linked to the National ID database. Scanners, printers, and cameras loaded in. Inside, a space to process documents. Outside, a desk to listen. No red carpets, no foreign consultants, no donor funds. Just a belief that people in forgotten streets deserve the same service as those in boulevards of power. They called it the Mobile Commissariat. Not a project, not a campaign, a commitment. And it began with one street, one truck, one morning in Boneville. This was not about efficiency alone. It was about memory. The kind of memory the state leaves behind when it shows up in force, not with guns, but with care. For the people of Boneville, it wasn't just the sound of an engine. It was the sound of government arriving, finally, gently, intentionally. And in that moment, something else arrived too, a new possibility. Because in places where the state is often a rumor, its appearance becomes a revolution. On September 2nd, 2024, just as the city stirred from sleep, a white truck pulled into a rent Mall 7. No ceremony marked its arrival. No officials cut ribbons. But word traveled faster than any press release. The mobile commissariat had landed. By mid-morning, a crowd had gathered. Not to protest, not to complain, but to witness. Teenagers came clutching school documents. Mothers brought crumpled birth certificates. Elderly men leaned on canes, holding old ID cards wrapped in plastic. Some carried nothing at all, just questions, just hope. The truck opened quietly. One side unfolded into a full administrative desk, scanners, computers, printers whirring into motion. the other a consultation counter for grievances, for inquiries, or just for conversation. No one shouted. No one barked orders. Officers didn't stand behind tinted glass. They sat at folding tables, and they listened. One woman, who had once waited 3 hours at a central station to legalize a single form, walked away from the truck smiling. It had taken just 27 minutes. The officer shook my hand, she said. He looked me in the eye. I felt seen. From 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., the unit served nonstop. People brought stools, umbrellas, even lunch, willing to wait not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The line was not a burden. It was a chance. Within 10 days, the Bonneville unit had processed over 2,000 residents. Birth records updated. Complaints registered. National IDs initiated. Follow-up scheduled. All without bribes. All without fear. But what truly marked this as different wasn't speed. It was presence. For years, the people of Bonneville had only seen the police in two modes, crisis or absence. Either they came during chaos, or they never came at all. Now, they were here every day without alarms. Just working. Just showing up. Teenagers lined up for their first national IDs. Elders updated documents ignored for decades. One man, age 64, stood proudly in front of the truck and said, "For the first time in my life, the Republic knows I exist." A nearby shopkeeper whispered, "This truck changed more than papers. It changed how we feel when we see a badge." And the shift wasn't just emotional. It was structural. Each officer operated on a rotation schedule, 2 neighborhoods per day, 5 days a week. The truck was partially solar-powered. Its maintenance required no special facilities. The entire system, tech, staff, fuel, training, cost less than $100,000. Compare that to a single fixed police station costing upwards of $400,000, locked to one location, vulnerable to blackouts, requiring constant maintenance. The mobile unit, by contrast, was light, nimble, scalable. It served more citizens in 10 days than some permanent stations did in a month. But perhaps the most radical innovation was this: it asked for nothing. No registration fees. No entry codes. No connections required. Just come as you are and be served. For Captain Traoré and his transition government, this wasn't just a win. It was a blueprint. Proof that sovereignty could be built not from above, but from beside. And in Bonneville, once overlooked, once forgotten, the state didn't knock with commands. It arrived with care and left behind something rare: trust. In the corridors of development agencies and government ministries, reform usually arrives wearing expensive suits, with multi-million-dollar budgets, endless feasibility studies, and thick consultant reports. But in Bonneville, it arrived on 4 wheels under a canopy of dust and sunlight. The mobile commissariat didn't need a grand strategy. It needed a simple truth: presence protects. And the math followed. A standard police station in Burkina Faso costs upwards of $400,000 to build. Add electricity, land acquisition, maintenance, and staff, and the price tag spirals. Worse still, that building stays put. It cannot adapt. It cannot move. It serves only those within walking distance. By contrast, a fully equipped mobile unit, vehicle, technology, solar backup, trained staff, and fuel costs just $100,000. 1/5 the price, but 5 times the reach. In just 10 operational days, the Bonneville truck served more people than several fixed stations did in a month. And it did so without the friction of queues, corruption, or condescension. This wasn't just efficiency. This was democratization. Because what the truck delivered wasn't just paperwork. It delivered visibility. And visibility in fragile democracies is everything. Before the mobile unit, petty crime in Bonneville and neighboring districts was a daily concern. Pickpocketing, document scams, bribery. But within weeks of the unit's deployment, local crime reports dropped by nearly 40%. Not because the truck carried riot shields or armored officers. It carried something far more powerful: trust. A shopkeeper summed it up best: "When I see that truck, I know someone is watching, not to catch me, but to protect me." This shift from fear to faith cannot be measured in arrests. It's measured in posture, in eye contact, in the way citizens speak when they no longer feel invisible. Mothers now walk their daughters to the mobile desk for national IDs. Grandfathers volunteer to help neighbors read forms. Teenagers bring their friends, not for show, but because they believe this is their state, too. In a country long haunted by bureaucracy and abandonment, the presence of a police truck was never about power. It was about permission, the permission to be counted, recognized, recorded. And that's what Captain Ibrahim Traoré understood when he approved this initiative. He didn't call for drones. He didn't demand biometric surveillance. He sent a message instead, soft, small, steady, "We see you." And across Bonneville, across Kédougou, across the urban sprawl of Bobo Dioulasso, that message has been received. So, when international analysts questioned the sustainability of such projects, when think tanks in Paris called it populism with a steering wheel, Burkina Faso did not reply with white papers. It replied with numbers, with footsteps, with smiles, with cues not of protest, but of participation. Because Traoré Burkina Faso wasn't offering charity. He was offering something rarer, a republic that remembers. And in that remembrance, people rediscovered what it means to belong. Success always attracts attention, but not always applause. When news of the mobile commissariat began circulating, the reactions from outside Burkina Faso were mixed. In WhatsApp groups and Pan-African media outlets, it was hailed as genius. But in the polished halls of Brussels and the editorial rooms of Paris, eyebrows lifted. Think tanks wrote cautious memos. Security blogs in Washington questioned the model. One headline read, "Populism with a steering wheel." The concern, they said, was not the idea itself, but what it represented. It wasn't designed by international consultants. It wasn't part of a World Bank plan. It didn't require Western loans or foreign oversight. It was local, cheap, and worst of all, it worked. Skeptics raised alarms about data privacy. These mobile units processed biometric information. Where was it stored? Who supervised? Could it be misused? Others questioned its sustainability. If it wasn't part of a 5-year donor roadmap, how could it survive? But Traoré's government did not fire back in press conferences. It did not seek permission to innovate. Instead, the answers came from the streets. In Kédougou, a 60-year-old man stood proudly before camera, holding his first national ID. "Today," he said, "the state came to my street with a smile." The video went viral across Francophone Africa. Mothers posted photos of themselves with police officers. Street vendors filmed testimonials in local languages. Youths took selfies beside the truck, not as novelty but as validation. It wasn't propaganda. It was proof. Local civil society organizations conducted independent surveys. One key result stood out. Trust in police rose from 30% to over 70% in areas where mobile units operated. That shift, in less than a year, was unheard of. Women reported feeling safer, walking alone. Informal harassment dropped. Children began calling the white truck our police, not the police. To questions of data safety, the government pointed to its collaboration with the civilian-run Office National De-Identification. All data stayed on local servers, processed by local staff in local languages. No foreign firms were involved. No information was exported. To questions of longevity, the numbers spoke for themselves. A mobile unit cost 1/5 of a fixed station, served 5 times more people, and required no external funding. But perhaps the most powerful answer was invisible, dignity. Because the mobile truck didn't just deliver documents. It delivered belonging. And when citizens feel they belong, they protect the system that protects them. Burkina Faso didn't wait for global validation. It built local legitimacy, and that is a currency no currency can buy. Across African news platforms, the story became more than an experiment. It became a mirror, one that asked neighboring states, "What's stopping you?" In places like Ghana, Niger, and even Rwanda, quiet delegations began making inquiries. Could this be replicated? What software was needed? What training? The answers were always the same. You don't need millions. You need courage. And perhaps that is what troubled international observers most. That one truck with 6 officers, a solar panel, and a folding desk could do what years of foreign aid had failed to achieve. Not a revolution with bullets, but a revolution of trust. What began as a quiet trial in Bonneville did not stay in Bonneville. By October, the mobile police units expanded to Bobo-Dioulasso and Kédougou. Local leaders began requesting trucks for their own districts. Word spread not through press conferences, but through community whispers. WhatsApp chains buzzed with pictures of smiling elders and orderly queues. Young men who once feared the state now stood in line to be registered by it. But something even more remarkable happened. Across West Africa, neighboring nations began to take notice. From Ghana to Niger, from Mali to Rwanda, questions emerged. What software do you use? How do you train officers? Can this be replicated? The answer, always, was simple. You don't need expensive consultants. You need committed officers, a second-hand truck, and a leadership that believes its people matter. And at the heart of that leadership stood one man. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, once doubted, now watched, just 34 years old, dismissed by critics as too young, too populist, too untested. But Traoré didn't campaign with slogans. He governed with steps, small, steady, and close to the ground. His philosophy was radical in its simplicity. Sovereignty is not in speeches. It is in presence. While other governments spoke of digital revolutions, Traoré Burkina Faso put a real vehicle on real streets. He did not wait for donors. He did not seek applause. He put wheels beneath the state and rolled it directly into forgotten neighborhoods. The result? A model of proximity governance, where the state is not a fortress to fear, but a neighbor to trust, where identity is not a privilege of the elite, but a right for the poor. This was not a PR stunt. It was a philosophy. It redefined what it means to govern, not from balconies, but from pavements, not with megaphones, but with clipboards and care. Other countries had mobile checkpoints, yes. Emergency vans, yes. But no one had merged administrative services with real-time proximity, policing into one humble truck. That truck, once parked quietly in Bonneville, had become a symbol, not of law enforcement, but of belonging. And as more units rolled out, the message grew louder. You don't have to live near power to feel protected by it. This is not just African innovation. It is African imagination. The kind that says we can build for ourselves. The kind that moves from below, not above. The kind that reminds the world, Africa does not lack ideas. It lacks space to try them. Now that space is being reclaimed, one street, one signature, one small revolution at a time. It was never just about the truck. It was never just about documents or efficiency or even safety. It was about dignity, the kind that arrives not with sirens, but with silence, that looks you in the eye and says, you belong. In Bonneville, children now point and say, that's our police. Elders wave without fear. Vendors keep their records proudly, knowing they are legal, finally seen by the state. The Commissariat Mobile did not solve poverty. It didn't end all crime. But it shifted something deeper, a sense that perhaps after decades of neglect, the state might finally be listening, and that in a region where trust has been worn thin, is more than a policy. It's a revolution, not in bullets, but in belief. In a world that often defines Africa by what it lacks, Burkina Faso, with nothing more than a truck, a desk, and a little courage, has shown what this continent can create on its own terms. No UN blueprint. No multi-million grant. Just one question. What if we move toward the people, instead of waiting for them to come begging? And when that answer rolled into town, the people remembered. They remembered what it feels like to matter. They remembered that justice can arrive quietly, that the face of government can smile. If this story stirred something in your chest, don't scroll past. Like, share, speak, subscribe, because they hid our history long enough. It's time to speak our future out loud.